All right, welcome to another episode of Eavesdropping. I've got, Antarctic Mike.
It's cartoon time.
Cartoon time. Yeah, Antarctic Mike. That's kind of a. I always have to think, what is his full name? Mike Pierce. Well known to many of the people out there in Speakerville as a great speaker. That really teaches the fundamentals of leadership.
I've been around a while.
You've been around a while. He's called Antarctic Mike because you did. Did you do one marathon on the Antarctic?
I actually ran a marathon, and a year later, I returned to run what they call the ultra marathon.
Oh yes,
which is anything longer than a marathon. In this case, it was 100 kilometers, or about 62 miles.
Yes, my son being on a marathon. Ooh. Yeah, and you used to, if I can remember correctly, were you living in Florida when you were training? You were living
San Diego.
San Diego, where it was warm, so you were training in a meat locker.
That's kind of the irony. I guess if I resided in northern Minnesota, it wouldn't be that dramatic of a story, right?
And I do remember when you were speaking. I think I met Mike probably through Vistage. He speaks as one of the top speakers for Vistage, which is the world's largest. And leading, maybe not largest, but the leading CEO organization. And I can remember you talking about training in that meat locker, which was like 52 feet long or 52 yards long or something?
59 feet.
59 feet. Okay, so it's close. Right, so, and you're all geared up as if it's cold.
Oh, it was cold.
Was cold.
Minus 20.
Minus 20. So you're running in gear in there?
Oh, yeah.
And you're doing 1 foot at a time or 1 yard at a time. What was the lesson behind that? I mean, I can remember it being impactful.
Well, it was
like, they say, don't chew the whole elephant off at once, right?
Well, the fact that it was only 59 feet, assuming that a forklift had not dropped off a pallet full of frozen pizzas, chickens, French fries, goat serum, whatever they got in those things, right? 59 feet was the longest possible length. That was the dimension of the freezer.
Wow.
So I had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Wow.
And
how many times then?
Well, it depends how long you want to go.
Yeah.
But what people really couldn't understand was the monotony, the mental taxation of this, right? But that's where, instead of looking at it as something that was a disadvantage, I saw it as an advantage. Because it was in one of those moments when I was going back and forth that I remembered something that happened when I was a kid. So I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I used to play hockey. And one night, my hockey coach, this was in 1976. I was 11 years old. He pulls me aside one night and he says, "You're going to play the game the way you practice. If you make the practice harder, the game goes easier. Skates away." And I thought, this is making the practice harder.
Yes.
Therefore, the game will go easier, i.e., when I get to Antarctica. And it did, because I remember when I finished in Antarctica, the 26-mile marathon took me a little over 7 hours. But when I finished, the instinctive thought in my mind was, is that all there is?
Oh, wow.
7 hours seemed more like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I changed my paradigm, and I chose to look at difficulty differently.
Yeah.
I chose to look at it as an ally and not an enemy.
Yeah.
I looked at it as something that could be to my advantage, not to my disadvantage.
Yeah.
And that shift has served me a million times over, not just as an athlete, but just as a person.
Yeah.
It served me in my marriage. It served me in my business life, my personal life, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, shift the thinking. You are, when I think about all the times and the lessons that I've learned from you, you really do have a gift to continually think differently about things. And even this year, my book I'm writing right now is called Harmony with 10X, Leading in 10X Living. And 10x leading is really, the ability to focus and 10 times everything.
Right.
And as I studied kind of the books that were out there, I thought, yeah, but what about the 10x living, right?
Right.
I mean, you can't just accomplish everything and get that 10x and not have it hit your heart or hit the true impact of what it is. It's kind of like when you finish that marathon, you
Right.
go, wow, is that it? And it wasn't the fact that you ran the marathon in the
Right.
Antarctic. It was the fact of the lessons of what makes you, what your vibe is, of really a deeper thinking and a deeper awareness
sure.
of everything.
That's why the conditioning in the freezer, the value to me as an endurance athlete is about that big.
Right.
It's the application in real life that's the real value. And what's funny is, of my whole Antarctic experience, everything from preparation to doing it, 99% of the entire value I got before I went to Antarctica.
Right.
The freezer is where the change occurred. The
Yes.
value of the whole story occurred in the freezer,
Yeah.
in the preparation, right? The event itself in Antarctica was just validation that it worked.
Yeah. So what was your vibe like while you were in there? Because we were just talking in one of
You
my
mean
board
as I
meetings.
was doing this?
Yeah, when we were talking my board meetings just last week, we were talking about the employee that may work for them that has a monotonous job.
Right.
Whether it's the maid cleaning the toilets or, the dishwasher or whatever, somebody who's just doing the same thing on the assembly line. And how do they possibly get a 10x vibe all the way through the organization?
Right.
Through all of them. It's like, how do you do that? And they really, one of the exercises I took them through the very first month we were studying this, I said, I want you to just go and, wander through the house here and write down 5 defining moments of your life.
Okay.
5 defining moments. And came back into a circle. So we got 15 men and women, all leading businesses. And they start to talk about their defining moments, it took about 4.5 hours. There were some tears and choked up, obviously.
Sure.
But after they got done with that, I said, now I want you to think about the energy and the vibe, the emotion while you went through it. And we listed all of those, and they were quite profound, whether it was, tenacity, perseverance, awareness, whatever it was.
You mean what was consciously going through their mind?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was what was their vibe while they were going through it. And it was interesting
Right.
because as we pulled those out, and I did memorialize them kind of into a paper that they could take with them, because when you're going through that, there's something that's happening in the inside. Like you said, you're transforming
Right.
in the meat locker,
Right.
not when you're on the Antarctic
Correct.
doing it.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So then when we captured that, and that's where I came up with the idea. It was the next week I wrote the book, because I said it's really about the living. The living is this essence of preparing on how you're going to live life.
Right.
That's you to a T. I
Right.
mean, if you would capture anything in stories or bring it out of CEOs or bring it out of the audiences that you speak before, it's really the capturing the essence of everything you go through.
Right.
And so, when you're going through that meat locker, what was your mindset and your vibe? I mean, did you think I'm nuts? Did you
No.
think this
Well-
is, oh man, I got,
Well, not. I mean,
my stride is so long, I can only get 40 and 50. I mean,
no. The only thing that went. I mean, well, once the epiphany hit me of the flashback to my hockey coach in 1976, from that moment forward, everything shifted in my mind. And what went through my mind, it was the same thing that went through my mind when I was in Antarctica. Because a real common question here is, you were out there for a little over 7 hours, pretty much by yourself. What did you think about, right? What was going through your mind?
Right.
And
What's
it's
your
the
vibe?
same thing as the only thing that was going through my mind in that freezer were old black and white pictures from 1914. I was picturing being on Shackleton's team when they were stuck. Those images, yes. And from that story, there's probably 50 or 60 images that have been archived and put out for the public to see. And I thought about those pictures flashed through my mind.
Yeah.
Because it was like, being in the freezer was like being with Shackleton in 1914. It really was. And when I was in the Antarctic, I thought, did they see this?
Right.
Did they step there? Did they hear this? Did they feel this?
Wow.
Like it was like being in a time machine.
Yeah.
So the freezer was like, almost like a replication of a time machine experience that I hadn't yet experienced. Because obviously being in the Antarctic was being in the time machine.
Right.
But the freezer was like the simulator.
Right.
Like a flight simulator for pilot training.
Yeah.
This was kind of like the flight simulator for going to Antarctica. And it was literally like going back in time. And I also pictured, okay, as I'm doing this, I'm strengthening these muscles.
Yeah.
These muscles, the muscle of confidence, of discipline, of focus, of purpose. I mean, there's a number of muscles up there.
Yeah. And that's 10x muscles.
Oh, those
It
muscles
was-
became like steel beams.
Right.
And I know I have a mind of steel.
Yeah.
And it was built in the freezer.
Yeah.
And it's a mind of steel forever. I mean, it's forever.
Yeah.
Because I've been through, I've been through some very hard things subsequent to Antarctica. And yet, I've come through those episodes a whole person.
Right.
Because I have a mind of steel. And I can owe so many things I can trace back to the value of being in that freezer. It's funny because this whole Antarctic, situation was sponsored by a company out of North Carolina.
Hmm.
They're a division of Haineswear. They make cold weather gear.
Okay.
And what happened was I got a hold of they have a PR firm that was based in New York, and I found them through a friend of mine in San Diego. And so
Interested.
the reason they were interested in this clown from San Diego was because in 2006, it was the company's 100-year anniversary. So I gave them this bright idea. I said, I got an idea. 100-year birthday, 100 kilometers in your stuff. And they went, we love it, you're in.
Wow.
And I went, hold on a minute. How far is 100
Yeah.
kilometers? Like I literally didn't know.
Because you were not a
But
runner.
I remember pushing the buttons going, 62.1 miles. I'm like, I don't even drive this far. It was kind of comical, right? But they were very interested in this. And so
Wait, how long ago, how much before was that? How long did you train?
that was, I had already come back from the marathon. I got back from my first trip.
Okay.
This was like in January or February now of 2006. And I gave them this bright idea like in March.
Right.
And then they said yes. And then I trained the rest of 2006. And at the end of 2006, I went and ran the 100 kilometers. So it was almost a year. But it was just funny how I gave them some wild idea. And they said, oh, we love it. You're in.
Yeah.
And I went, wait,
Okay.
how far was this? So they were kind of...
Which is, they were behind you and ready.
Well, they were
but
like,
don't,
well, think about it. If
don't
you're
go
if
and
you're the
screw it up.
CEO of that company, and you got some clown in a freezer in San Diego, and he's got this story, and he's running in your stuff,
Yeah.
you're going to want that.
As long as you do it.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Well, of course.
And that's interesting because that's kind of an energy of 10x leading and 10x living. It's when you say something, you pitch something, you make the call, and then you go, okay, there's no turning back. There's no turning back. I'm in it now. 62 kilometers.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm in it now. Okay,
Right.
divided by how many months before I'm up there?
When the customer calls and says, we love it, you're in. That's it.
Right.
That you're committed at that point. Like, there's no turning back at that point, right?
Yeah. And rather than show them in the camera, I'll kind of put them up on the screen. But this picture too of the Antarctic
Isn't that
that you
stunning?
gave me, when I do look at that, I have this up in my office along with this one. It really did. You said you were thinking of just the black and white images from long ago, and there really isn't a whole lot of color other than I can remember you saying that the white of the sky and the white of the snow just came together. You couldn't even see the...
Yes, because it got cloudy. And so when the clouds from the sky kind of come down to the horizon of the land, there was no horizon.
Mm.
In fact, one of the nicknames of Antarctica is the land of no horizon. Because you can't tell the difference between the ground and the sky. And this was a bit of a litmus test for the mental strength. Because think about it. We're running,
right.
right? We're using
Right.
energy to go forward. We're moving
Yeah,
forward, but yet there's no visual indication of forward progress. It's kind of like that car trip you took as a kid. You saw the mountains way up in the distance,
Yeah.
and you went, 20 minutes will be there.
Right.
20 minutes later, you're not any closer than
Right.
you were 20 minutes prior, right? Because depth perception can really alter your ability to track
Yeah.
forward progress. And so I had to really think about, okay, we're moving and we're expending energy, but my mind is not telling me that you're making visual progress. That's where the strength of the freezer came in, because that's where the mental muscles of steel had to take over. Because I didn't have a visual aid to drive me forward. And so I had to come up with it in my own mind. I had to create it.
So, this morning we were talking about stress and, another eavesdropping episode that I did with Dr. Wu, and how he was saying stress is really accelerated and we reach burnout a lot quicker now because
Right.
we don't have, we can't predict and we can't see progress, right?
Right.
And so if you're on the horizon and you can't see the horizon, you can't see anything that you're predicting, right?
Right.
Or you're looking at those mountains and you think it's only 20 minutes, but they're still way out there. So now your predictability is way off, your progress is way off,
Right.
so your stress is way off. So I understand, and you have the amazing capability to be extremely insightful and determined, disciplined, really do lead 10x and live 10x. But with someone who cannot see the horizon of where they're going, they're not on the Antarctic, but in their everyday life.
Right.
And they don't yet have the mental discipline. And I call it that itty bitty shitty committee creeps in there to go
Right.
itself, right? And just robs you of the stories and gives you everything that you possibly can't do, and you begin to believe them.
Right.
What's your advice for them to begin to exercise that muscle?
In other words, how do they find the drive when there is no horizon?
Yeah, and right. Okay, there is no horizon. I don't even know where I'm going. There's
Okay.
nothing out there, okay? And then they're not you way up here at the 10x leading in the 10x leading.
Right.
They're here going, I want to though.
Right.
I want to be able to run the meat locker like
Right.
Mike.
Right.
What would you say to them?
It's very simple. It's called a prize. You have to, if you don't know what the prize is before you go in the race, forget it. You're not going to get there. You have to know what the prize is. And in my case, the prize was finishing because it was my way of walking in the footsteps of my heroes, and I wanted to relate to them. I wanted to understand what it was like 100 years ago to be in the mind of Ernest Shackleton and the people that were a part of that team. That was the prize. The relatability to my heroes that lived 100 years ago.
Okay.
But I knew that going in, and that was my prize in the freezer. That was my prize in Antarctica. That was the fuel in the tank that kept us driving when there was no horizon.
So we'll come right back to that. Take a little path for those who are eavesdropping. They may not know who Shackleton is.
Shackleton was one of a number of people who lived in the early 1900s that became part of this quest to put Antarctica on the map for the very first time. It's called, I forget what they called it,
So they were explorers.
the heroic age of polar exploration. There's a particular term used for that period of time, like between 1900 and 1920. And Shackleton was one of several. There's Robert Scott, there's Amundsen, there's Byrd. There's a number of people from that era of time who intentionally became the first people to go into Antarctica when nobody had ever been there.
And was Shackleton from the U.S. or was he from Europe?
United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom.
Most of these guys were all from
Okay.
England, Scotland, Ireland, the whole United Kingdom part of the world.
Okay.
The U.S. has very little history in Antarctic history, very little.
And so you have a fantastic presentation on that. A really good one. One of the most profound presentations I've ever heard of listening to all these great speakers. The essence of the postcard that has been on my wall since the very first time I met you, is the big ship, and it's sinking, if I remember. And
It's stuck, right?
It's stuck, and they could apply all the mental logic and discipline to it, which at that time I often say, yeah, you do as much data analysis, but you don't have you got to get to the gut sensing or intuitiveness. And Shackleton tells them to go out and play ball, right? And that's the picture that you have. So they're out there playing soccer,
trying to free the ship was stuck in 20 feet of ice, 20 feet of solid sea ice. And at one point, they were trying to use poles and ropes,
Right.
and they had hand saws when it's 20 feet. I mean, that would be the equivalent
Yeah.
of standing on the roof of a 30-story building with a bottle of water when the
Right.
fire's coming,
Yeah.
right? I mean, obviously,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
taking a bucket of sand to the beach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not gonna move the needle. And so what Shackleton did was he got his people to focus on this game, and so they played this soccer game. And the image that they captured is interesting because the original image that you have a copy of was not altered in any way, shape, was not photoshopped or altered. And in that image, it shows the ship in the background, and then it shows the soccer game in the
Right.
foreground. But the goalposts from the game are literally the ship is in between those goalposts. And so it's interesting how in that frame,
Interesting.
in that photo, it's like it's separated what you could not control, i.e. the ship, from what you could control, which is the game. And if you think about it metaphorically, the ship represents everything in your life you have zero control over, which the last
Which would
time
be,
I checked,
it's
a long list for most of us.
yeah,
Right?
And so I can't see the horizon is something you can't control. Going
That's another
back
one,
to,
yeah. I
Going
don't
back to
know
the
where we're
individual
going.
that says, how do I don't have the discipline or the tenacity that you do, and I can't see the horizon. So the very first step is, yes, you said you have to have some passion, some reward, some prize, but it's probably even more so than that. You have to say, I can't control that I can't see the horizon.
Well, that was the prize. Because specifically about Shackleton, what the attraction for me was the character. The character of somebody who, number one, I'm intentionally, by design, going to go into a situation that nobody had ever been in and that was way in over my head. I mean, to me, that's a very attractive character because if you think about it in the
Right.
real world out here, there are a lot of scenarios we have to go into, never been there, maybe nobody else has ever been there, right? I mean, think about this for companies. You want to attract better people, right? You want to attract better customers that will pay more money for your stuff.
Yep.
You want to attract the attention of employees who work across the street that make good money, that like their boss, that don't need you, right? You want those people. They're not going to come unless your organization is doing things others can't or won't. For example, you're solving problems that nobody else is solving. You're adding value that nobody else is adding. You're creating experiences that nobody else is creating. If you're not doing things that other companies can't or won't, you will never attract better people. Otherwise, you're just average. You're like everybody else.
Right.
And nobody's going out of their way for average.
Yeah.
Nobody.
So that's the 10x and the 10x living
Yeah.
is the 10x is the doing and the action and the intention and getting the big hairy audacious goal and conquering it. But it's the 10x living, the mindset, the discipline, the purpose, the passion.
That becomes the magnet.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And Shackleton exemplified that, and that's why I fell in love with him and I wanted to walk in his footsteps. I thought anybody that's got that kind of character, I want that guy. Like when I first picked up the book in August of 2001 in that bookstore, I instantly thought of my boss. And I thought, I wish my boss was more like this guy. I literally transposed my own world right into 1914, and I thought, that's the guy I want to work for. That's the guy I would get up and drive further and stay later for. And I'm not that different than anybody else. And so I knew that that kind of character needed to be showcased in a way that other people could become like that in their own world, even though they're not going to Antarctica.
Right.
It's not about Antarctica. It's
Yeah.
about the character that it takes to attract people to do things like Shackleton
Yes.
did in the real world out here
Yes.
today, whether it's in hospitals,
Yeah.
families, manufacturing, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and that character is defined by those defining moments we have in life where we look at, I had to bring the energy of tenacity or the energy of radical acceptance or the energy of, letting go. I mean, that
Right.
is what built, those energies build the character. And that was my whole kind of experience after talking about 10X, which of course, leaders want to see their companies grow. They want to build successful companies. They want their people to go home and feel very satisfied and
Sure.
pride of, with pride of what they're doing.
Sure they do.
Except I kept thinking, well, what about the living part? And so it's like most high achievers and people who are, in leadership positions can get let's set the big goal.
Right.
Let's say we did it.
Right.
We're going to do it, and we do it. But all of that character, the energy, the mindset, the emotion, the passion, that's the fuel. And anybody can do that, Mike.
That's correct.
Anyone.
That is correct.
The person who's, the lowest person on the totem pole in a company or whatever, or the kid that had the tough life and just, ended up in jail at 16 and is out, anybody can do it.
That's correct.
Because it really comes down to, you might not even be able to see the horizon, nor can you even look in the history and see, great stories in your own historic life
Right.
to get you there.
Right.
However, that's really when it can begin.
Sure.
Because like you said, it started in the meat locker. Not when you're in the glorious Antarctic with, people taking pictures and, you getting the, hey, you did it and all that. No, it started in the meat locker where
Yeah.
nobody knows you're there except for maybe the forklift driver is going, who the heck's this guy in full gear running on our meat locker?
The guys that work for Good Humor, they were a tenant. Because the freezer I trained in was a commercial freezer where you rent space, like in a storage locker. It just happened to be refrigerated and frozen. So the guys from Good Humor Ice Cream used to call me the Arctic Idiot. Oh, it was funny. It was like watching a cartoon at the freezer, right? As you can imagine, right? Because I lived in that freezer. It was kind of funny. But you're right. I mean, nobody knew. But it's funny because 98% of the value of the entire experience that I bring to people and the lessons that I can bring came from the freezer.
Right.
That's really where the value of the whole story is. Antarctica was just the validation that it worked, and it's a credibility piece too, because a lot of people were like, I'm most astonished and impressed by the fact that you actually did what you said you were going to do. And to me, I'm like, well, why would you not do that? And I guess I look around the real world, and a lot of people say they're going to do something, and they don't do it. Right? So following up and following through became the credibility piece.
Yeah. But I think the most important of that is if those individuals were here sitting in the room that said, yeah, I really have never done anything before. I haven't accomplished it. I just always seem to quit. I self-sabotage. I get the imposter syndrome, Most people would say that they would put the focus on the actual running of the event in the Antarctic.
Right.
And you're different because you go, no. I started in the meat locker. I didn't have a place to train. I didn't live in the cold. I had to make do with what I had. It was very short. It wasn't even ideal. It was a short meat locker, and so it says you can start right where you're at.
And Angela was not going to relocate to International Falls, Minnesota, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada, or Oymyakon, Siberia, the coldest inhabited town on Earth.
Right.
Last January, actual real temperature, not fake temperature called wind chill. The real temperature in Oymyakon, minus 62 degrees.
Yeah.
Wait, we're not finished. Centigrade.
Oh, jeez.
Let me help those of you from this place called the United States who were not fortunate enough to be around for that 6-minute period in like 1971 when we foolishly tried the metric system and quit. Right? You remember that. You remember that 6-minute period. Yeah. We tried it. We were like, we're so impatient, right? Minus 89 degrees Fahrenheit, real temperature. Angela is not. She's staying at the beach in San Diego, right? And it's funny because that Oymyakon, I dream about that place in the winter.
Oh.
And the only reason I haven't gone,
Hmm.
there's a guy over there I'm a little nervous about. His name is Putin. I have this in my mind, like, he'll give me the tourist visa for 30 days because he wants me to come and spend money, right? Now it's time to go back home. I'm sitting on the plane getting ready to fly back to the States, right? And the Russian cop goes like that. I'm sure that doesn't happen, but that's how the movies. I've probably seen too many movies, right?
Right.
Like I can hear him like, oh, this guy likes the cold weather, eh? Oh, he likes Siberia. We'll put him in a hole, we'll put him in a place in Siberia for the next 2,000 years where he'll get as much cold as I can see that, right? Like, oh man, like, what are you doing, right?
Do you like the cold now?
Yeah, I've always liked cold weather. I've always been a winter guy. I
Okay.
don't get cold unless it's, like in my mind, it doesn't register like it's cold unless it gets to minus 40.
Oh,
That's where centigrade and Fahrenheit cross over.
okay.
I've only been in that temperature once.
Yeah. So another interesting lesson I've learned from you over the years, which has been very, very helpful during my last 3-4 years, which I've had a lot of change and transition and horizons you couldn't see, is to let go of what you can't control. Powerful, right? If I could say that over and over and imprint and tattoo myself with that. And that's been something, I mean, Shackleton did that. He let go.
He had to.
Yeah, how did they ever get out of the ice?
Well, what happened was they never made it onto the continent. Their plan was to get to the edge of the continent and then on foot they were going to go across. They never even made landfall. So the ship got crushed. They lived on the ice. And then they pulled 3 life rafts off the big ship before it was crushed. And then Shackleton and 5 of the others went to go get help.
Okay.
They went 800 miles across what's called the Southern Ocean. This is the roughest ocean in the world. It's the body of water that sits between the tip of South America and Antarctica. Put it into YouTube and you'll see what I mean. People die out here regularly. So they spent 17 days and nights battling 50 and 100-foot waves to go 800 miles to get to civilization. And they made it.
Okay.
There's an entire book written just on the 17-day and night part of the story. The number of stories within this story are endless. But nonetheless, they made it, and then they sent a rescue crew back. It took 4 tries to get back, because remember, they had to send somebody to rescue the 22 that were left behind. And when they got back there, they were all alive.
Yeah.
So all 28 people lived.
Yeah.
And it really is one of the greatest stories in recorded human history anywhere in the world.
Yeah. With a lot of lessons.
Oh, the lessons we could be here on camera.
And
from
so
now
when
till
we do
Christmas.
finally let go and stop controlling, it's very interesting. I grew up in the Christian faith and, around with a lot of, practice of prayer and meditation and all of that. And I think through my own journey of self-awareness and change and having to let go, I realize sometimes I think when we pray, we're really not letting go. We're just attaching more and more to the thought.
Holding on strong.
To the thought. And I found myself even this past week, mentioning to a friend saying, who was really in, just a place where she would just say, please pray. I got a whole group of people praying for, this one thing that I want to happen. And I out of my mouth comes the wisdom of Mike, going, maybe let go, and sometimes it might be snarky because people aren't ready to hear let God, but just let go, let go. Let go and let it happen. And I do think when we do sometimes let go, there's a different energy that comes in that creates the idea or the next 10 steps. In Shackleton's case, and I think there's other times where we let go.
Well, it's like
it's
like dropping a mental 50-pound rock.
Mm.
We carry so many stones up hills every day, right? And when you let go, it's like you're dropping rocks, and rocks get heavy, even little ones, especially as the grade of the hill goes up.
Yeah, right.
And the duration seems to go forever, right?
Yeah, it's
because
like holding that glass of water, and they say, "Here, hold the water." Oh, that's easy, fine. 10 hours later,
Yeah.
you're still holding the water.
Yeah.
Going, well, yeah, a little teeny Teeny
a
bit.
little bit that we hold on to becomes very heavy weight.
Yeah.
And especially when we hold on to it for
Yeah.
weeks, months, years, right? I mean,
Now you've written 3 books or 4 books? He doesn't remember.
I lose count.
You know you're good when you do. Yeah.
It's like how many?
Have you written a book on the let go and the really releasing the control and being able to have
That's a chapter.
radical acceptance?
That's a
of
chapter
anything?
in 2 of the books, but I am now writing one that I've already started about the importance of letting go, based on what I went through this past December in the year 23. So I am writing that story because people struggle badly with letting go. I mean, for the viewers, my wife died in late December of 23, and she was pretty much in the hospital from Thanksgiving to Christmas. And I learned more in the month of December about what it means to let go than I have in the previous 30 years of my life. And, I've been teaching that point, letting go,
right.
for 20 years. But it's funny how the teacher becomes the student. Because now, when it's my turn to let go, now it's almost like God said to me, okay, you claim to believe in this whole idea of letting go, right, Mike? Let's see how much you really believe it.
Oh.
I almost feel like he had that tone of voice.
Wow.
Right? Because now when it's your turn to let go, it takes on a different meaning.
Yeah, and so you have God saying that, and then your wife saying, I'm going to let go, I'm going to...
Oh, yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, the thing that, I know this is a big struggle, because even in the hospital, even on the floor of the hospital, we were in 4 West, in this hospital in San Diego, and I could hear arguments down the hall. Families, spouses, kids, doctors, fighting. Do we pull the plug? Do we not pull the plug? Do we do the procedure? Do we not do the procedure? This is, and I understand, it's hard.
So they're life-changing...
Oh yeah,
they're life-releasing decisions.
These are the most highly charged emotional moments that a person can experience are in those kind of moments, right? And yet, I didn't want to let go. I was saying, well, Angela, let's try all these surgeries and let's get machines and tubes and needles and, let's give it a try, And Angela was like, no, it's my decision. I'm in tune with myself. I know when it's time to let go and when it's not. And I'm like, you know what? She's right. And I had to get behind her. And I did. And I learned how to do that.
How? Just because you've been one that always was able to do it?
Well, I'll tell you, because I changed my point of view from looking at it from Mike's point of view, looking at her. I looked at her, I looked through her eyes in the world in front of her.
Yeah.
And I had to see it from her perspective. You're never going to be able to change your paradigm unless you see it from somebody else's perspective.
Right.
I mean, didn't Dale Carnegie talk about this, right? You got to see it from their perspective. Right. And it's true, you have to get out of your own way and look at it. I mean, of course, look, I want Angela to live forever. I mean, we've been together we had 34 Christmases. I mean, which Christmas is the one that's okay to be enough?
Right.
I mean, theoretically, it's never enough.
Yeah.
But life starts and it finishes. It starts and it finishes. And, think about it. Everybody likes to start. When the baby's born, when the puppy and the kitten shows up. But we hate it when it finishes. We don't like funerals, and if you've ever put an animal down, oh my God, that is just... I'm going to cry. I mean, May 23rd, 2011, Sebastian sat in Angela's lap and he died.
Yeah.
I mean, that was terrible, right? Yeah. But yet, we don't like those days. But if you think about it, if there's no finish, there's no love. If I could take Angela and freeze her in time for 60 million years, at age 25, beautiful, no fat on her, no disease, no accidents, no credit card overspending, no bad attitudes, perfectly straight white teeth, right? No problems. I'd be married to a mannequin. And even mannequins have a shelf life because plastic degrades. Right? And that helped me to let go because by design, life is supposed to start and it's supposed to finish. And people are supposed to experience finishes. We're typically going to experience this. We're going to say goodbye to our grandparents, probably our parents, sometimes our spouses, sometimes our siblings, God forbid our kids, our grandkids. But if you think about a marriage, if you're married a long time, somebody's going to go first. I mean, unless you're both on the same plane that goes down.
Right.
And I mean, really, you've got a better chance to win the Range Rover at the fair, right? By putting the 12-inch basketball through the 10-inch hoop, right? I mean, it's not going to happen, right? So realistically, in a marriage, somebody's going to go first, right? And so you got to be okay with that. It's not forever.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be married forever. I'm supposed to be married for Angela's lifetime. And of course, the definition of lifetime is a very relative word. In her case, it was 57 years. Sometimes it's 27, 37, 107, 147. I don't know what the longest lasting person is, but whatever it is, it's a drop of water in an endless sea when you look at the big picture of time, right? So I had her for her whole lifetime.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
Yeah.
That's an honor.
Right.
I had 34 years. How many people get 34 faithful, solid years with one person?
Right.
The answer is fewer than do. Fewer than do, right?
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I look at, Shackleton was an interesting character. He, during his lifetime, he took 4 trips into the Antarctic. And in each of those 4 trips, he never hit his goal. Not once. He was 0 for 4 in his lifetime. And so, but the thing I've noticed about him was he always seemed grateful for what he had, not ungrateful for what he didn't.
Didn't have.
And I thought, look, I've had 34 years. I'm going to be grateful for 34 years, not ungrateful that I didn't get 35 or 40 or 50. Because, I mean, I've had many times when I'm like, one more. One more Christmas, one more birthday, just one more.
Right.
But when you get to one more, it's always going to be one more. It's funny because in early December, Angela said this to me. Let's assume I go through all these procedures, and let's assume it works. Now that's a big if, but let's assume it works. And let's assume that it buys us 34 more Christmases. She said, so now we have 68. She said, what do you think you're going to want at year 68? 34 more, right? I mean, it was obvious, right? Yeah. It's never enough, but it is.
Yeah.
Because you got to look at life optimistically and realistically. That's a balance beam, right? You got to walk the balance beam.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that because our emotions pull us. But this is where we have to stay objective. In a world of emotional chaos and tornadic activity, we have to somehow be able to walk the balance beam between optimism and realism. We have to, right? Because reality is reality. And, the reality is the human body is going to run out of gas.
Right.
And, we have this built-in mindset in our culture that says, we'll just keep fighting.
Right.
It's heroic, and anything less is quitting.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm like, you know what? There's a difference between quitting and getting knocked out by Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Big difference, right?
Yeah.
You can sit in a car, and you can be optimistic, and I'm not a quitter, and you can put your right foot through the floor and push on the gas pedal. But when there's no gas in the car, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
And even if it's an electric car, if it's not charged, it isn't going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And the human body is just like that. And in Angela's case, there was no more gas. There was no more electric charge. There was no more. It got used up. There's no dishonor in that.
Right.
No dishonor.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of honor when you have the courage to look at this and go, I recognize this and I'm okay with it, and I'll go to the other side.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's going to be like when I'm there.
Yeah.
That's incredibly courageous.
Yes.
And heroic.
And then you're right. Without love, you really don't have the pain. Sometimes you have lack of love, and so you have pain. But the pain in many of those situations,
it's a testimony of the fact that I care.
Sure, of the love.
Sure it is.
And my dad always said, "Pain is inevitable. Suffering is not."
Right.
And so when you can take the moment and take that energy of love that you experience in a whole new, different way of release and let go and honoring her and the radical acceptance that you had to have, the release of the not going to control it, you're just going to, suspend with no horizon again, no horizon of what is next.
I mean, the end's coming one way or the other.
Yeah.
I think the thing, though, that I carry forward that I'm, I don't know if I say most proud of, but that I think about a lot. Angela wrote the last chapter of her life story.
Yes.
She wrote the chapter.
Yes.
Now, there's going to be a last chapter for everybody. The only question is going to be, how does it read and who wrote it?
And who wrote it?
And in most cases, it's the circumstances that write it instead of the person.
And in
It's
Angela's
written
case, it
she
wasn't.
wrote it.
She wrote it.
She wrote it by choice, not by circumstance.
Yeah.
And that's something we all have an option in.
An
We do.
option
We all
in,
have
yeah.
that capability. And it's not like she had superhuman power or the recipe
Right.
for Coke or, something that nobody else has. I mean, she had the ability to do it, and we all have that ability. And the fact that she did that is probably the thing I'm most proud of about when I look back at her life. And I thought, you know what? What do we have to do today in order to start writing that chapter? Because we need to start thinking about that while we're in our prime. Because once you get past prime, the circumstances take over.
Yeah.
And Angela wrote that chapter in the month of December before she went downhill.
When I coach and mentor leaders and role models and high achievers, and we start the session, which is often on Zoom versus in person, I have them just breathe, and I just want them to, I want them to notice their gut sensing, right? The intuitiveness, we all have it, like the dog who knows that we're coming home an hour before we get home. We all have it.
Right.
Maybe some people don't understand it, but we do have the nudge, the hunch, the snag. But I want them to start there, and then I want them to move up to the heart. And I say, the gut senses, and the heart kind of gives the right, wrong.
Right.
No judgment, but you can tell whether you're aligned with it or not. And then you move up to the mind. And
Right.
the mind is, really has two energies. The egoic energy of all the stories and the trickster, I call mine the itty bitty shitty committee. Or the other mind, which is aligned with just that love energy of creation and ideation
Right.
and innovation and imagination, what Einstein said he always worked
Right.
from. And sometimes I have them kind of focusing on it, and I say, what is it that's speaking right now? Where do you want to start? The gut, the heart, or the mind? Sometimes it's all three.
Right.
And so I think of Angela at that time when she makes this profound decision that's going to impact the one she loves the most,
Right.
that's going to impact everyone around her, probably even make the doctor's head spin, right? That she sensed in her gut, this is okay, I am going to make the choice. I mean, she wasn't in her head with all the logic and the data and the analysis.
Right.
None of the logic or the data or the
Right.
analysis would have agreed probably with her decision.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And so that's where we say that's where you got to get back into the intuitiveness, which is the gut. And so she, and that's when we're born, how do we know to get up and walk and fall down 100 times? We
Right.
just intuitively do
Right.
it. So it's interesting that she was able to get right back into her intuitive spirit, defy logic with great courage.
Yeah, I
She
see what you're saying.
defied it. She said, "No, Mike, no, I know it's this. No, doctor, I'm going to." I mean, my book is going to be called "Intuit Through It." She did intuit through it and aligned it with her heart, which is the love, and that is what an amazing experience to go through as a
Courageous,
spouse.
yes.
And wow,
It's bizarre, but what we went through in December, it's not anything the rest of us aren't going to go through.
yeah,
I mean, I was just on the phone before we started this conversation with a friend of mine in Oklahoma who lost his wife 3 months ago. And he's been through this. I mean, and all of a sudden, in the last few weeks, I've met so many people. Like they're all coming out of the walls. People who've lost their spouses. And I'm not talking about people that are 90 years old. I'm talking about people that are my age,
Yeah.
like in their late 50s, right? It happens. It's part of life.
yeah,
And it's okay.
yeah.
It's okay. I mean,
Well, it's wisdom that's coming forth that you're connecting with.
I'll tell you,
It's
there's a sense,
incredible wisdom.
I feel a sense of completion and maturity now that I've been through this that I didn't have before. And there are definite silver linings in this dark cloud, no doubt about it. But that's because how I choose to see the picture,
Yeah.
right? You have to look through the right lens in order to get your focus. That's why people wear glasses, right? Because it changes your focus and your ability to look at things in front of you. And I've just chosen to look through certain lenses that make sense, that help me let go and move forward. Because life's going to move forward no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? I'm either going to move forward as a person that didn't come out whole and is damaged, and this is why people take drugs and drink and stay in the cave and don't talk to anybody and whatever. And I'm not doing that.
And when you get that horizon, kind of going right back to the very beginning of our conversation of where you can't see the ice and you can't see the sky, you know, in the Antarctic, and it's foggy, you just go within. And everyone has the opportunity. I mean, I really think that that's kind of my work too.
They do.
In the next fourth quarter of my life, is to be able to really teach people that they all have what Angela had, she had the intuitive sense. She loved herself to listen to it. You loved her enough to honor it. And that's where you get the vibe and the energy and the idea, and the heart goes, yeah, you can do this. And then you apply it to the mind and go, okay, I'm running a 59-foot meat locker, or I'm going to sit here and leave this hospital room or leave this room and know that my wife has made this choice. And you had to get out of your head. You lived that month. It was probably so profound because you lived in your heart and in your intuitive gut. Your intuition guided you through it.
I did. I mean, I lived it for a long time, and I had a chance to prepare for it because I came home to an empty house every night for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, is this what it's like? Like forever? Mm-hmm. Like for the rest of my life? Like you start, because I knew when she went in early December, I knew where it was going. There was something that told me this is it. And then in mid-December, then when we realized her vascular system was compromised and her veins and arteries were collapsing, that's when we knew there's no way. This is like scaling a wall without a rope. It's just not going to happen. And that's when we knew it. And then you have to really let it sink into your heart that, okay, this is the end, right?
So if Shackleton, one final question before we close. If Shackleton was sitting right next to you, and he too faced, I don't know if we're going to get off this ice or we're all going to die, or
right.
But if he sat next to you, what would he say about your most recent experience? As he would sit and say, Michael, you are the student of mine.
It's funny you asked that question.
What would he say?
If Shackleton was sitting right here today in February of 24, right, what would he say?
To you.
He would say the same thing that I heard him say on December 24th of 2018. December 24th of 2018 was the first time I started letting go of Angela. She was in the hospital. We've had Angela's background medically. She fell off a mountain in Durango, Colorado when she was 18. It was a 150-foot free fall. I mean, she never should have lived through this. She had umpteen surgeries. Her bones were broken in like 160 places. So when I met her, I knew she probably wouldn't live the life expectancy, right? But so we had all these hospital visits. We had over 100 hospital visits in 34 years together. But on December 24th of 2018, she was in the hospital, and I spent the day with her, and then I came home. It's Christmas Eve. No tree, no lights, no kids, no nothing. So I'm standing in my house in the dark, and I'm thinking, when this episode is all over, is she coming home with me or without me? That was the first time in 30 years when I realized she may never walk through the front door again. Her blood pressure had gone to like 250 over 230. I mean, she should have blown up like a bomb, right? But she didn't. And so I was thinking, okay. Then I thought about Shackleton. In that moment, I thought my hero, Ernest Shackleton, to your earlier comment, must have been in moments like I'm in.
Right.
Because they were stranded for 2 years, right? He must have been thinking about that. Then I remembered something Shackleton said when they got back from being stranded. He said this: "We had seen God in his splendor. We heard the text that nature renders. We had reached the naked soul of man." And I thought, the naked soul of man. The best book title anybody could ever write, right? I mean, right? I thought, what is that? That has to be the intersection where the very meaningful intersects the very difficult. The very meaningful intersects the very difficult. So he's standing there in a very meaningful moment in his life, and difficulty is everywhere around him. Very similar to what I'm facing right now. I thought, well, what would he say if he was standing in my house? Then I heard the voice. Let Angela go. Wait a minute. What do you mean, let her go? I can't let her go. I've been with her for 30 years. This is more than half of my life. Yeah. Angela is the first and only girlfriend in my whole life. I literally won the lottery on one ticket, right? I can't let her go. Mike, it'll be okay. No matter what happens, you'll be okay. One of the promises of God is this: you will never get more than you can handle. Right. Never. That's a promise. Right. And he's never broken it. And so I trusted him. So in that moment, I did let her go. Emotionally, mentally, physically, I let her go, meaning I was going to be resolved that no matter what happened, it'll be okay. And that was the first moment. Little did I know that letting go is not a one and done thing.
Right.
I mean, it's
continuous.
It's like painting a bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as you get to the end, you're right back at the start, and it just goes around like the hands on a clock. Yeah. The difference is the pitch of the hill goes up, right? Yeah. But that was the first time I really, and I'll tell you, it was so liberating to let her go. Because then I looked at all the time we had as bonus time. Like the cup was full. No matter how much more time we get, the cup can't get any more full than full. And so that's why when she died this past December, it wasn't as traumatic as it could have been. Right. Because the cup was full when she died. It was full 5 years prior. It's been full for a long time. Yeah. And I've always chosen to see it that way. And that's why, I credit Shackleton, this guy that I ran into in a bookstore by random chance in 2001, right? Didn't know anything about him. Died 100 years before I was even here, practically. The guy changed my whole life, changed my marriage, changed everything.
Changing a lot of people's lives.
Changing a lot of people's lives, exactly. I mean, that's why we could go on for hours about all this, but the value of these stories and archiving them and capturing them and passing them on to other people is invaluable. It's how we learn. Yeah. We learn from guys like this, women like this, years ago that lived and went through periods of time of difficulty and trauma, because the most valuable lessons for us are found in the most traumatic situations. Right. The higher the degree of difficulty and trauma, the greater the lesson. Right. It goes back to the old saying we all know, you get what you pay for, right? Yeah. When it's expensive and hard, there's value. Yeah. When it's free and easy and cheap, there's nothing there.
Which was interesting that I followed my gut when I kicked off this 10X leading theme for the year as I mentor all these CEOs and said, let's get them to go in on the defining moments. And their defining moments were not easy things to get through.
Right.
Life-changing defining moments. Right. And that is what kind of, exactly what you're saying. You just capture that and then you just keep working it for your life, and anybody can do it. And everybody has defining moments.
We do.
Everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we had this discussion. Yeah. I have to go meet Rob.
I hope you do write that next book, and I know that you travel the country speaking and sharing your message, and also capturing stories too, which continue to capture the stories.
Absolutely.
You drive around the country and pop into a business and say, "Hey, what's your story?" And he actually really means, "What's your story?" Not because you're looking to, write the book, do the video, or whatever. You really want to know the story because that is your passion.
That's it.
Of learning. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for eavesdropping. If they want to get you, it's Mike. What is it? It's Antarctic Mike?
Just go to antarcticmike.com. email, phone numbers, everything's listed there. You can email me, call me. I'll spend as much time chatting as you
Yeah.
like.
And somewhere out there, he has a whole bunch of books written. He just can't remember how many.
I've replaced some. I've rewritten some. I get lost.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job. Thanks.
Meet Kathy Fitz, a passionate and creative business mind, and an extraordinary connector of people. Using her intuitive gifts as a guidance system, Fitz always has multiple adventures in focus, both in the business world and in her personal life. She is a heart-based living and leading expert, CEO coach, mentor, confidant, author and founder of the leading heart community and a serial entrepreneur. Stay connected with Fitz on her YouTube channel called Two Chicks That Spark the Heart and connect with her on LinkedIn. Also join her Facebook group called Heart-Based Leaders Making a Positive Impact in the World. We look forward to connecting and hearing from you.